Thank you very much. And the doctor for Joanne. So this is a comment for you. And of course, and I will question about your presentation later. So of course, your research and survey and the result were quite interesting, and especially the young people who are undergrad the survey. So and how they consider about donation and how they consider about donor card as well. So of course, and we usually think, and maybe that might be by the religion or social background and social norm, etc. But how do you consider about the concept of dead body and after death world? So it might be different from the consideration of those points, and maybe and they might keep the body, or the family would like to keep the body after their death. And of course, and we, especially Japanese, have to discuss how we consider, how we define the death. So, and even the brain stop, or even the heart stop, and somebody might not understand the person die. So that is also another thing. But especially, even when we understand the concept of death by medical doctor, and we cannot change the concept of dead body or after death world. So, for example, and Muslim or Christian might believe that, and they might live again and in the heaven. So in that case, and they might hesitate, and their body might be cut, or some part of the body was taken away. And of course, and the family concept and the attitude and the barrier for understanding is also important. So, and that is a good point to discuss. And also the role of donor card. But how much do they consider about the signing the donor card? Of course, it's a kind of one good timing to think about donation. But if you consider about the system itself, family might not consider about the card. The doctor or hospital cannot find the donor card. So if the family knows, if all the people must consider about donor card present, and of course the society has to change, and all of us have to think, even we don't sign or we deny to donate the organ, and we have to sign. So yes or no is also important for donor card signing, but we don't consider. So that is one weak point in Japanese society. And also, and we have to think about Japan society. For example, Japan society is not based by charity or volunteer. Of course, and this, of course, the 2011, the year of big earthquake in Tohoku area, that was a kind of first timing to think about volunteer widely in the nation. But still, and we don't think about the individual body, especially dead body, have to be offered or donated for other people or society. So individual service or contribution to the society, that kind of concept, including charity, volunteer, help each other concept, is also different. And so, of course, we don't say that Japanese are gentle. And of course, Japanese are gentle. Japanese are sometimes very generous to help other people. But still, this is too serious to think about it. So behind the dead family and some tragedy or hospital serious situation, donation is somewhere, and we don't think about that. So we have to think about the system, and we have to have some, what to say, some occasion to think about it. So, so maybe it can be a good case if you compare with the case of South Korea. 2011, and the Korean government set up and KONOS. And KONOS is, by the way, the English name is the National Institute of Organ, Tissue, and Blood Management. So that is especially for organ donation. So KONOS established, it's quite big for Korean society. So state has a responsibility. So state has a system. So, so medical doctor have to take care of the patient, alive patient. So it might be difficult for them to explain about the donation. They might be hesitate to push them to think about a donation. But, and so when they have the brain death, so, and so at the clinic and the hospital have to report to the KONOS, and the KONOS send a specialist to explain about the chance of donation to the patient family. So that kind of state responsibility and liability for the system is quite effective. So if you think about that, and how do you think not only about Japan's situation, and even for and Malaysia and some other society which donation is, but the donations case is very low. But if the government or state has a responsibility to set up the institute, and it's quite different. And of course, another thing, and the Sumitomo Foundation fellowship is for Japan studies. So I will ask you again, how do you think about Japanese society for organ donation? How can you change this situation, especially if you think about Japanese custom and manner and thinking way? So that is the second question. Yes. So next, the comment for Dr. Pauline and your colleague, and thank you very much. And but maybe at the time is limited, and Japan's case is not so much mentioned. So please explain. And so before the presentation, and I got only the one page abstract, and there is not no mention about the Japanese case. So please explain how you recognize, how you evaluate the Japan's system and journalist competence, and how to create the education background and training to be a journalist. So, and how about Japan case? So that is a problem. Of course, you explain deeply about journalism competence. So how to make the skill and how to increase the chance. But still, we have to think, and education and training to be a journalist are the various. And as you explained at the end of the presentation, and so Japan and on the job training is mainly within the journalist and the media company. And of course, education training to be a journalist, maybe mainly three type. So school education, like, and Western way, and maybe and the USA, and some other European way. But UK is divided, it's categorized into the group of AGT. So it's a kind of interesting when I did and some of the research and studies. So how do you consider the role of the on-the-job training to skill up not only to skill up, and also to obtain and journalism competence. If you compare with school education, like a journalist school or media studies or something. And also the third type is support by association, unions, or the guild. So, and that is also on the help. And so if you know, and maybe you know, and UNESCO's model curriculum for journalist education. So they also had three type of education. So model education for journalism education, model curriculum should contain three. So one is so practical vocational thing, like how to interview, how to investigate. The second is theoretical studies, including the Japanese media studies thing, and ethical as journalist. And the third is also the important, and also so those three. And if you think, third is sorry, and so general art. So general art, including social science and history and political science or other things. So UNESCO's model curriculum said the first category should be 47. So that is a practical, and so the interview, how to write a news article or other thing. The second, and mainly and the Japanese journalist school there and media studies there. But that second thing, and the journalism theoretical study is only 10%. The third, and the general art, and so it's including many things. So to be well knowledge to analyze that. So that is 43, I think. I cannot read my number. So 43. So when we see that, and interestingly, and the Japanese media studies only offer 10% according to UNESCO's model curriculum for journalist education. How do you think? How do you evaluate Japanese way, merit and demerit? But this is not for media studies or journalist program. I mean the practical, actual situation. Currently in Japan, journalist training, journalist education is mainly by on-the-job training. How do you consider about that? Because maybe you find in the process of your researching on Japanese journalism or journalist studies or journalist education studies, Japanese media has a press club system or the other Japanese custom and manners. Sometimes intervene and sometimes, how to say, and interrupt professionalism as a journalist. So, of course, you think, and on the job training is much easier for media industry because they are supposed to learn Japanese custom and manners, how to behave in press club system as well. So after that, and one more question. How do you consider about the new situation of social media? So social media, if you have social media, even when the mainstream media are shut up, do not talk about something, some political scandal or something, and the social media will talk. And of course, some of the mainstream media also pick up some of the topic. So the situation is quite different. So in that case, especially for Japanese journalists, how do you consider about new journalism education? So that is my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yoshimura Sensei. Would you, scroll up? so that we can have a look at the comments for the first speaker.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, so that Joanne will be easily answering the questions. Okay,
Yes.
the left time will be used for responses from two presenters. And I know that you both of you got a lot of complicated questions or comments, but I hope you to pick up in your order to make a kind of a systematic or comprehensive responses to Professor Yoshimura's comments. Okay, Joanne, you have time.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Sonoda, and thank you very much, Prof. Yoshimura, for your questions. Uh, yeah, there are many questions here that you have raised, many valid points here. And I do agree that religion, as you mentioned, a lot of families, not just in Japan, but also in Malaysia, they do have this concerns that if I were to give away my body, I may not have a good afterlife because there's an element that is missing from my body. So if I look at the rates for Japan, actually life donations are actually higher than donations after death because of this. People do not, I mean, the relatives do not hesitate to give their needed organs if it is needed by their relative who needs a kidney, for example. So live donations is actually higher. It's pretty high in Japan itself. So I think regarding donations after death, I think the reasons here that Prof. Yoshimura rightly pointed out is it is that without this whole body intact, I cannot go into the afterlife. And I think so that is why it is actually very important um, for the medical practitioners and for the organ transplantation agencies to educate family members and also society that this is not true. I think in Malaysia we have this concern as well. Some religions in Malaysia actually think that it is not prohibited by their religion to give away their body after death. So I think there is a need to educate in Malaysia. For example, the religious leaders have to play a role in educating society about this. In Japan, it is a little bit tricky because if I look at my sample, a lot of the Japanese say that they don't have a religion. But I think in this role, then the medical practitioners, the organ transplantation agency would need to play a role in educating, especially the more traditional or older Japanese on this concept. I think the younger Japanese are okay to give organ donations, but they are withheld by their family members because usually when you give consent for organ donation, it is the family at the end of the day that must give the consent. If the family does not know about this, then the donation cannot take effect. The other thing is I was told during my interviews with a lot of the organ transplantation agency in Japan is that it is the doctor who decides whether the organ is suitable or can be removed for organ transplantation. So perhaps there is this mistrust towards the organ transplantation process also. So perhaps people need to be aware of how decisions are made regarding organ transplantations and how decisions are made regarding organ donations. In Malaysia, we have an opt-in system where if we want to donate organs, we have to sign the organ donor card. I think in Japan, it is the opt-out system, uh, which I am not able to, I think it is the opt-out system. So I think if Malaysia, for example, has this opt-out system, perhaps organ donation rates would actually be higher for us. So I think for Japan, there is a need, in short, in Japan, there is a need for the medical practitioners, the organ transplantation agencies to target families itself and to talk to them about what organ donation is and that it is not true that if you don't have your body you cannot go to the afterlife. I believe it's called Gotai Manzuki, something like that. Yeah, I was told there was this term that We cannot go to the afterlife and we cannot rest in peace. So that is the role of religious and social background is, on it. And yeah, family consent is definitely something that has to be talked about, because in Malaysia, for example, we can sign the donor card, but it is actually the family that does not allow it. So family consent, targeting them is actually very, very important. Similarly for Japan itself. Now, role of donor cards. For Malaysia, it is actually a lot of people do not know even where they can donate, where they can sign up for the organ donation. So I think this is one of the issue, yeah, the role of donor cards. If we have the opt-out system, then it doesn't matter, as you know, you are already in the system, you can donate your organs because you are already in the system. And I think this was practiced by Korea when they changed it to opt-out system. Actually, the organ donation rates actually increased. So I think although there are discussions that opt-out it may not have effectiveness on organ donation rates, but I think it will increase organ donation rates if countries actually um, implement the opt-out system. Well, Japan's individual and service and contributions to society, I do agree again with Prof. Yoshimura that Japanese are very, very helpful, very, very much very kind people. But I think the act of volunteering, being kind, helping each other, I think it doesn't necessarily represent altruism. Uh, which I think Japan is often we view it as a communal society, but in reality, I think there's a substantial amount of self-interest that is also evident in the younger Japanese. If I look at my results, and you can actually look at my results, altruism, which is the role of altruism here, which is being kind, being very helpful, actually did not influence the attitude of the Japanese to donate organs. So you find that altruism may not be true. It was also not true for Malaysians. So I think people don't see donating organs as something that is volunteer. I think they see it as a right for them to make that decision. They don't see it as helping others. And so I think that is something that we need uh, to say that it is not perhaps not targeting it as an altruistic kind of behavior, I would say, but probably because moral norms is something that is pretty strong. I think we both countries can actually emphasize it as a moral obligation rather than something kind or something that is volunteering to do. So I hope I have answered the comments that were raised by Prof. Yoshimura, but I do appreciate your suggestions to look into the Korean case study, which is on Konos, which I definitely will want to look into it to compare how it has actually improved South Korea's organ donation rate. Thank you very much, Prof. Yoshimura. Thank you, Prof. Sonoda.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Joanne.
Well, actually, the interactions between Professor Yoshimura and Professor Ho is suggesting consciously and unconsciously an importance of an interdisciplinary approach. I do think that Joanne came from medical communication or social psychology, but the questions raised by Yoshimura Sensei, who is an economist by nature, but the type of questions he raised is it has to do with the different disciplines like philosophy or history or national character, or even the kind of some medical system in which the kind of patients are located. So but anyway, it's really difficult to answer all type of questions. But anyway, be aware that you might have many hidden questions, raised potentially by different scholars from different disciplines. Okay, Pauline, it's your turn.
Okay.
Yoshimura Sensei, would you go let us look at the kind of page 4? Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you so much, Professor Yoshimura, for your insightful comments. And first, let me preface my answers with the fact that journalism education literature is still sort of a battlefield. So it has a lot of debates. So the theory versus practice debate is still ongoing in a way. So the skills versus theory. So the offshoot of this theory versus practice debate, it's still ongoing pretty much. So with that, first I want to say, or I want to inform you that in the interviews, this was really the setup of the arrangement, or I would I say, the system of Japan in which OJT, or the on the job training, or the system in which you become a journalist only through OJT, or in-house company training, was criticized because in a way you socialize the journalists into sort of a journalism culture. So this is how we do things. You should not question this because this is how we have been doing things since the beginning. This is the so-called journalism, or occupational ideology. So because of that, because the journalists see that as the only way into the profession, they're also sort of they sort of internalize this pathway. So this is how we do things. This should not be questioned. This is the only way to do things. So in that way, the critical reflexivity, which is very crucial in a profession such as journalism, because journalism is undergoing different changes as of the moment, is being sidelined by in this kind of system. So because the supremacy of practical skills training, and also the ideology of these media companies sort of take the front seat, or the driver's seat, um, okay, the driver's seat in this situation. So it is necessary for us, journalism education, to put an emphasis now on critical reflection, because then journalism or journalists can be more agile or flexible in the time of changes. So, for example, I'm so sorry we lack the time. Earlier, I wanna include also, of course, there are a lot of information from the interviews. For example, what the interviewee said about their difficulty in putting or prioritizing units, as well as the different factors that influence journalism education. But we could not cover all of that in the presentation. But they did say something about the pitfalls of such a system in Japan. So you are right, Professor Yoshimura, that there are indeed different pathways to being a journalist. But in literature, this journalism as trade system has been criticized already, because then um, the journalist, even though he or she knows how to write news, produce texts, he then lacks the capacity to make sense of the changes. So, okay, then we see, for example, the rise of AI. So, what are the sociological implications of the rise of AI on audiences as well as journalists? So, then, if you have this sort of academic training that would allow you to make sense of things and to anticipate changes. Also, these tools, for example, a grasp of academic theory and academic research tools, then you will be able to anticipate changes and be more agile in the face of these changes, because we could not predict changes. Okay, so one of the interviewees shared that at one point in time, they were training their students to use this particular type of technology. But then, 2 years later, the technology is no longer being used. So then, should we put emphasis on technological training or practical skills over critical reflection and theory? And you are right. This is actually a problem, not only in Japan, but also in many countries. So journalism education still puts emphasis on practical skills development, because then they are industry centered. I mean, of course, collaboration between industry and academe is very important, but these should not sideline theory and critical reflection, which is what's happening now. Now, what is also interesting is that one of the interviewees shared an idea, and I find this interesting. And also, I anticipate that many other scholars, or many other practitioners more so, would question this idea that journalism should be a graduate profession. So journalism should be like an MA course instead of a bachelor course. Instead, it would be better for a journalist to have a different bachelor's course, say economics, and then take journalism as their master's. It would have been better, because then you have diverse career paths. You can then, even though the jobs in journalism are quite precarious, then you can easily shift to other careers. But then that could be questioned by other practitioners, especially. So anyway, the reason I said that is because um, we want to interrogate the prevalent idea that journalism education should be practical skills centered. And now going back to Japan, um, the one of the challenges or one of the problems that come with this system is that the journalists then would be socialized into the norms, the practices of the existing media companies. Okay, so then the tendency is, how would they question that? Do they have the tendency to question that? That's why in the framework you could see in the cognitive behavioral base there is this one cluster, critical reflection, and that is important. If that is missing, then there's a problem with journalism education. Okay, then yeah. So I think I answered three questions here. So how do you evaluate Japanese way? I already explained the merits and demerits, as well as the Japanese yeah, the system, the professionalism and the press club system. And then just very quickly, the new situations by social media. Indeed, it uh, um, it has called for reconsiderations in journalism education literature. So social media has eroded the gatekeeping function of journalism. And that's why many journalists also have, for instance, their own Twitter accounts to also show how they do journalism and sort of create a branding for themselves. It's also part of the framework that I showed you earlier. So, I mean, we don't have the time to discuss the different situations by social media. I mean, people, as I said, people now get to choose their source of information and they get to question journalism, and they get to, um they get to thrive in their own filter bubbles. So but now actually the trend now is actually in scholarship is actually um to look for the implications of AI in newsrooms. So social media then, and then AI in the coming years. So I hope I addressed the question.